So hello everybody and welcome to a special show that it's my great pleasure to today be hosting with my teacher, guide and friend Leslie Shankman. Hi Leslie, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
So we've teamed up to do a special Cosmic History Codes show, a stellar perspective on the upcoming Capricorn Solstice or winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and of course Southern Hemisphere summer solstice for those of our friends down under. So today, Leslie, we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at the energy or the themes behind the astrological imprints that we're looking at in the upcoming Capricorn solstice on the 21st/22nd of December. So today's show is going to be a sort of an introduction to how we can start to read the themes from a cosmic perspective through the astrological chart. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my teacher and guide in all of this process with the Stellar Nations pathway, which of course you can follow and join with us here on quantumplanet.world. But Leslie, this is something super exciting that I know we've been planning for a while. And how do you want to preface this to our audience today?
Okay, well, as you know, I put together some slides because this is a big concept to get ourselves around. We're not really looking at astrology. We're looking at our cosmic history as revealed through the stars, and it does come through an astrological lens. But I put together some slides so we could quickly just establish context.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at is what the it's called the Antares Code, which I'll be explaining, what it will be at the point of the solstice. So it's a point in time where we have the frequencies coming in of certain stars, and we could take those as seed messages, say that we want to grow, and we'll take the context and then we'll look at those messages. And I have it planned on our slides to show you how to look at the Sun and Mercury, particularly the Sun, because, you know, it's really representative sort of our higher self and our radiant aspirations, but it's also an entity with consciousness itself that feeds us information, and it actually channels the stellar rays through down to us. Yeah. So, and then Mercury, because it's so close to the Sun. So those will be the lead kind of themes and messages at this point of time. And we'll look at all that and then get out of the slides and decide, you know, we can amplify whatever we want after that.
Right, thank you. And it's worth probably pointing out in the same way that if you were to get 100 astrologers in the room and ask them all to look at a chart, they probably all look at 100 different things and come up with slightly different perspectives, all of which are congruent and coherent. And it's the same with the Antares Code and these stars. As Leslie just said, she's going to pick out the Sun and Mercury because they're conjunct on this Capricorn solstice, but there are lots of other points in the chart that also have some interesting stories and themes to share. So maybe we'll touch on one or two of those as well. But, you know, as always, these are multidimensional filters through which to look at both the three-dimensional realm, but also the much more expansive 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th dimensional aspects of ourselves in relation to the cosmic unfolding and the cosmic history. So I'm excited, Leslie. So do you want to pull up the first two slides, and we can talk people through this, because it can get a little confusing to begin with, but actually in essence it's really about feeling into the themes that want to happen at this time of year. And as with any sort of planetary conjunction, those themes are going to come through the filter or the lens of that particular planet, right, Leslie?
Exactly. And we may hop around and see. I want to do the lead in with the Sun, because especially at a point in time, I feel like that's the most relevant as setting up something. You know, honestly, if I read an individual Antares code, I gather the main theme through the ascendant, because it's a different, you know, like you said, everybody has a different perspective. So, but yes, we can look through any lens to amplify or get angles on a message. So, because it's all holographic, really. Any one is a part, and we'll see that. So when I do these slides, I mean, each one is a fairly big concept, but I want to sort of buzz through them. I just want to establish our context.
Good. Yeah, I think it's important.
Okay. Can I share now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, let me get up the slideshow aspect. You know what, Zoom gets in the way of picking slideshow. There it is. Okay.
I have to say, Leslie, considering how much I use Zoom, your ability with slideshows, presentations, and Zoom in general puts me to shame, because you're a lot more adept at it than I am.
Well,
It makes a difference.
jinx
It's so
me
much
by
more
saying that now, okay?
yeah, okay. Cancel, delete,
All right.
cancel, delete. Wow. Okay. So here we have the basis, I guess we could say, of the channeled information. So do you want to share a little bit more about this, Leslie?
Yeah, what I want to say is everything I'm talking about is based on a 2-volume set of books called The Stellar Nations and Their Chronicles of Our Galactic History in the Milky Way Galaxy. And these books offer a living system of knowledge. And you might say, well, okay, it's a book, there's static information in it. But no, because it's our cosmic history as revealed through the stars, and stars are sentient living beings. And this is orienting us into how do we understand the messages that are coming through them. It's giving us a comprehensive, systematic way to understand that, which we'll get into. But just to know how this came through in 2005. We've got Dr. Beatrix Seziel and Aniko Grescu, who are 2 women in Hungary. They're very close souls. They've been together in many, many incarnations. Beatrix she's an MD and a homeopath, and Aniko is a healer of many disciplines. But their real mission and purpose has always been to heal at the root, at the soul level. And that's what this is about. So they've been about that for decades. And what happened in 2005, they were well familiar with the Pleiadian energies and working with them all the time. But they were approached by a stellar delegation from the higher dimensions. And they were told that there's 13 soul families in this creation cycle. And they were basically prepped. They had to build this kind of temple with crystals that allowed dimensional openings. Anyway, they were taken through steps. And over an 18-month period, the delegate of each stellar nation is a master light being that lives like on the 8th, 9th dimension, came forward one at a time, expanded their consciousness, which they call attuning. They don't really call it channeling. It's more like they keep their center and expand out to encompass. But they were taken to the star Antares, which is a 7th dimensional star in the heart of the Scorpion. And they were told that on Antares, the Akashic records for the cosmic history of the Milky Way galaxy are held in sound. So they attenuated to the sound, which became patterns, which became fleshed out in these cosmic myths. So that's where this information comes from. And there's many places where Akashic records are. They're on Sirius, they're on Alcyon, they're on the Earth, but this is a specific kind of Akashic record, which is the Cosmic History Chronicles.
Right. I just want to add something at this point. In the world of channeled information, all we can say, I think your description is much more accurate of being attuned in this case, particularly when it comes to cosmic stuff. There has been a tendency in the spiritual world for some of that information to be a bit ungrounded and maybe not necessarily completely correct. Now, what I love from a personal perspective about working with this material is I was able to feel the energy or the transmissions of both your narrations, Leslie, in the presentation pathway that we've laid out, but also the reading of the words. And because my partner Bella is translating into Spanish, we were able to work through the material in Spanish and in English, receiving both the written and the spoken word. And what I can say from direct experience is that it activated various components of my soul's DNA, and I could feel it happening and have been very profoundly over the last 6 months. So I just want to share this from a personal perspective, that this material is super powerful, and when we're in the right place to be activated, it can activate instantly the different kind of codes that we have related to these 13, we can say, archetypal soul families, but they're actually connected to different constellations in the sky. So this material is very, very powerful.
Yeah, okay, and we'll keep going on to illuminate that some more. So what we've got here is I can't read what's across the top. What does it say? Because the
Chronicle of galactic history reflected in the stars.
okay, thank you. The Zoom thing is blocking it. So this is what I wanted. I want to get away from the fact it's not really fixed star astrology. It's, you know, it's tempting to try to grab it, but it's not. It's our history reflected in the stars. Got to know that the stars are sentient beings. They're dimensional worlds, and we live on them. Our soul, aspects of our soul are on certain stars. We're there by resonance, because the stars within each soul family or archetype are, each one is a world unto itself that is developing and learning something. And that's our soul. So that is like the cell of our light body. And its illuminated light is making our, you know, the shape of our light body. It's sending down frequencies that are making the bones or skeleton of our light body, the circulatory system of our light body. So we can really come into knowing ourselves on these dimensional levels. Now, we're there unconsciously all the time, and maybe in our dreams. We can be there very consciously once we start to know these worlds. I mean, we apprehend them by reading it. I try to illuminate them by doing the series we've done, so it's audio visual as well. But we can apprehend them consciously, and the requirement is we enter through our heart, and we have to have the intention. So let me see if there's anything else about this. All right, let's move on. So
just to clarify, sometimes in astrology, we talk about fixed star astrology, and I think that often links very much into Vedic astrology. So even though this does work on some level with stars that some people might call fixed, we're making a distinction that this is not necessarily the same as fixed star astrology, which maybe is something that I've said in the past. So just to clarify that too for everybody listening.
Yeah, and I totally understand why you said that. How do you explain what this is in a couple words? You can't.
It's difficult.
Try to buzz through a few slides here. Now, notice something about these 13. This forms the fruit of life. Okay, fruit of life, if it's a geometric pattern, and the fruit of life as a geometric pattern is 13 orbs. And 13 denotes unity and movement among worlds and forms. And if you're a musician, you know that the 12 notes on the scale establish the scale, but the 13 note is an iteration of the first one at a higher frequency. So it creates a new octave, moves into a higher form. And I'm bringing this up because this is kind of metaphorical for what happens when you start engaging with the stellar nations. And we can also look at the fact that we've got the 13 fruit of life creating Metatron's cube. We can see on the here, and that's the basis of all the shapes that are in creation. And what that does, Metatron's cube is the building blocks of creation, represents how creative energy flows throughout the universe. So what we're doing when we embody the 13 stellar nations, it's like we're creating this possibility inside of us. We're becoming, our body is becoming able to be flexible on the higher dimensions and have different expressions and reading into what's going on. So let's keep going. All right. We find ourselves, I think, more collectively still, you know, maybe not individually for some of us, but we're kind of trapped on a planetary type of framework. We think we live on the planet. Oh, it's dark out there. There's aliens. Oh, maybe they're friendly. Maybe they're going to attack us. You know, there's all this stuff going on, and it's not very coherent. And we can't solve our issues from a planetary level. Also, the thing that happens in this kind of thinking, it really does lock us down dimensionally, because our sense of time on the planetary level, you know, our day-to-day three-dimensional level is past, present, future. It's very linear. So we have a great deal of stress as beings because we're always thinking that we're responsible for creating the future. And we have this kind of myth that the future has to be better and we have to have progress, but that's exactly what's taken us out of the organic divine matrix, which is more fluid, and it's led us into the over dependence and belief on science, the material world, versus understanding the grace of the divine intelligence. So let's go to the next slide, because what we really want to point out is that we live within a vastly immense organism, literally, that has consciousness and order. So just like the cells, the stars are the cells of our light body, they're also the cells inside this huger organism, the divine mind or the creator, whatever we want to call it. So if we start to recognize the stellar rays within ourselves, which this whole cosmology gives us a way to do, we can expand our planetary consciousness towards a stellar consciousness. We can understand the truth of the container we live in, but then that can recode our collective consciousness. So this is what we can each do as individuals to get to that tipping point. And I know we're all, we're trying to do that in many ways, a lot of us, but what we're saying here is this offers a very, as you said before, a very coherent, systematic way to develop a larger consciousness that isn't willy-nilly.
Yeah. I mean, when I first came to this material, Leslie, I'd literally just been working with the dandelion plant, who has a very strong ability to rearrange our DNA. He is he's a master geneticist, and I found that doing that work in conjunction with the plants and then coming into stellanations really was the manifestation of the energetic work that I just literally had done with dandelion a week or two before. And bringing into a place of coherence allow me to experience it fully through my body, and I can say mind, body, and spirit. And that's how I always know when something is true for me, because it resonates in my body. And I was able to see the coherency in my codes, the same as in my astrology, by looking back through my life and going, oh my gosh, I can see exactly where all of these great things are played out and all of these not so great things are played out. And that's, I guess, shifting from a more 3D earthly experience into a more cosmic, multi-dimensional experience, and experiencing my soul's traumas or my soul's experiences succinctly in this 3D, and understanding what was behind all of it in the first place.
Exactly. And as you've said before, which I think is a good way to sum up this a little bit, you've started calling the understanding of the stellar rays and which really tells us about the journey of our ongoing consciousness, kind of tells us our galactic DNA, if you will. You've been calling it the blueprint behind the blueprint. And yeah. I think that's very accurate. And that brings us here, because the stellar rays project into our light body, and they create, or they are really our light body, they create a very complex stellar field around us. And when we incarnate, we come through, we know our body comes through the birth canal, but our light body, etheric body, whatever we want to call it, actually is coming together with all these rays of light, and we're pulling in based on whatever blueprint we designed. We have a stellar mantle. We're bringing in those stars that where our soul is inhabiting, that we want to bring into this incarnation to work with, like in the third dimension. We want to, some of them are real gifts and some of them are real challenges in the third dimension, but we're coming down to raise the octave of all this. So, but the point is, even though when we come through, this stellar mantle is always around us. It's a remembering field, and it connects us to our galactic essential self. It holds the history of our existence. And we forget it because of the astral fog, or then we seek to find it. And actually, I should say too, the stellar nations is really a pattern of stories that show us, our original kind of innocence and connection, what our gifts were in each soul family, how we might have stepped away from it or why. And then it's a pathway really of redemption and return. So it's this whole guidebook on how to do this. Okay, so why would we want to know it? The thing is, this is where the coherence that you and I are talking about come in. if you can call something by its name, if we can see it so that we can name it, we can understand it, we can accept it, and we can have a certain kind of control over it. I'm talking about the good kind of control, that makes us coherent.
Right.
So when we get to know these stellar powers and their qualities, which is what this is all about, the harmonizing and recoding forces sent by the celestials, because that's what's coming through all the time from our stellar mantle and the celestial form of us, get a meaning. And once they get a meaning, it opens the memory or revelations in our consciousness, and it opens our spiritual power. And we can work from then on with a much broader spiritual power and consciousness. Okay, so then here's an example of, it's laid out on the astrological radix. It's two-dimensional on the page, but it's a hologram. We know it's three-dimensional. And we're literally in the middle of our own stellar hologram once we're born. So we've got, if we know the powers that are coming through the stars and their meanings, it's like they're attached to us all at once, right? So now we can move out of that linear sense of time, really, because what we're here in the middle of this hologram, there's information that's simultaneously coming to us from all these directions. You could call them simultaneous timelines if you want, but they're coming into our present moment. So they're informing our present moment. And it's kind of like we blossom out in the present moment into something bigger, but bigger that's true, because it's got a coherency to it. It's based on our galactic understanding of ourselves and what our consciousness is doing.
I mean, what I love about this, Leslie, that I realized very quickly, and I think you talk about it in one of the unicorn stars in the very first module, is that this really brings you into the present moment by showing you, in theory, what your soul has already done to get here and what it's going to do as a result of all of that. But it's actually all happening all at once. And by being able to shift our multidimensional perception and understand that this did happen in the past on one level, but it's actually also happening now. And as a result, I'm also able to project into the future and project back from the future into this moment. So I understand that it's all simultaneously happening all at once, which on the face of it sounds kind of confusing, and particularly if we're not used to this much more circular, less linear type of thinking. But what it really does is it breaks down the illusion of time, particularly linear time, and shows us that all of this is a simultaneous experiencing that me and you and everybody else watching this are experiencing in this very present moment. And the more present we are with it, the more we understand our multidimensional nature in its essence.
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't obliterate our sense of self. In fact, it
the opposite, in fact,
unifies it, but then it takes our sense of self out of any boxes. We become boundless, like that Metatron's cube. The creation can just keep happening with these forces. And we still have enough of it. There's a sense of memory there in that, how do you learn? You have to kind of know, you make a mistake, you learn. There's a sense of memory there in our galactic history that's coming in, but it's not binding us to the past. It's informing us. Okay, so
you
go
pulled
ahead.
up a chart here, Leslie, and just to clarify for our audience, what we've done is we pulled up, or Leslie rather has pulled up the natal chart for the solstice using Greenwich as the meantime as the dial, but we're really just looking at where the planetary placements are. And what Leslie is showing here on the screen is all of the different stars from the stellar world, we can say, but laid out according to the planet's positions on the winter solstice. So we can see that on the solstice that the sun is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. Of course.
This is at Greenwich time, right? So it's the going to be different clock face everywhere, but
más o menos.
Right. Yeah. So the sun's at 0 degrees Capricorn, and the Mercury is fairly close at 1 degree 32 minutes. So this is the radix for the moment of the solstice.
Okay.
based on Greenwich time. So what happens if you get into this and you want to get your Antares code? So the Antares code is basically it's a layout of the stars that were, you know, imprinted when you came in, when you were born.
I have mine here, a very well-worn copy with lots of notes made on it. It's quite the thing, just so that people get an idea. This is basically what you get is a series of different radexes according to the different 13 nations, and then you can see what your own birth code is, and accordingly which themes are going to likely come up for you in your life. But we're doing the same thing here, but for the solstice. So we're looking at the themes that are going to come through the solstice portal, right, Leslie?
Well, yeah, there's an imprint at that moment. It's like a seed. And if we want to be conscious of it, then we can work with that seed, because it's a pivotal point, the solstice, because we're saying, oh, we're at a point of returning to the light. What do I want to take forward into the light, right? So as you alluded to, the Antares Code is a multiple page report because there's 13 stellar nations with, well, 230 stars mapped in the books, but because they're living, this is a living system, there's probably been about 30 more mapped since 2005 and 6. And that's an interesting thing too, because those have been revealed as we've come more into the photon belt, and the deeper story of each nation has come out. Sometimes the intricacies of some of the lapses, because our collective consciousness has been imprinted with that to kind of be, they're almost like initiations from 2008 to 2021 in each stellar nation. The story came forward into our collective unconsciousness, and you can look at the happenings of a year. It's interesting. It really reflects the themes of a stellar nation in any given year. But at any rate, what we were asked to do is to deal with it. And so there's many more stars. It's kind of the whole idea of how we, you know, we didn't see Pluto to the 30s. We didn't see Chiron.
I was going to say the same thing, right? You know, we didn't
Yeah.
see Pluto. In fact, many of the planets, the outer planets, were not revealed until relatively recently in human history. And now we're going beyond those into the KBOs and even further
Right.
afield planets like Cygnus.
Right.
So I think the understanding is that as human consciousness remembers its own evolution, these planetary bodies get revealed accordingly. And that's a whole other esoteric conversation for another time. How and why does that happen, I think, is a very interesting thought. But the same thing applies to the stellar nations. As the collective consciousness, I think, sort of unfolds and reveals its own remembrance of itself, these deeper layers of the stories get revealed in the same way they do in astrology.
Right. And I can also say we can really be sort of humbly aware that we're fully in the photon belt. So this is a time of deep change and deep information and light. But according to this cosmology, well, 3 grand cycles are changing, or that's not even according to this cosmology, but are coming to culmination. But we are set for a cosmic rearrangement. Okay.
Thank God.
Things moving around. It's really real. It's not just this, you know, oh, maybe someday.
Maybe another way of thinking about this is, you know, many of us on the spiritual path, we can say, or the path of evolution and remembrance, will have been experiencing, and we're recording this just a few hours after the full moon in Gemini here in November, and we can say that there is a very strong process, an energetic process of expansion that is going on right now. And you know that is something that is going to happen. The astrology says that, but also it's kind of mapped out in the cosmic history. And again, there's a sort of, it brings in the question about free will and divine fate. And I know that that's also a big part of the stellar nations too, divine will and free will. And perhaps you're going to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, well, everything you can bet that every theme is personified. So we get to see it through the stories, but then we get to see it through ourselves. Yeah. So yes, to clarify, on an Antares code report, you're probably going to get, I think it's about 5 radexes, because you've got these 13 stellar nations and multiple stars, and you can only illuminate 3 or 4 soul families on a radex, because you just would have too many stuffed in. But then what happened, and then after each radex, you have those soul families just shown in a form that I'll show you, but then you have a culminating page, which I'm now coming to. You have several pages that are the summary of all your stars and their position. And so we can see the sun on the solstice at 0 degrees Capricorn. We can see the stellar nations that are going to be coming through the sun's gate with the particular stars. We can see the degree at this moment. This just refers to, in the back of the book, there are, I should say, like pictures of where the heavens, where the constellations or the stars are. And then this particular column is, well, it's volume 2, page 33.
And I just also add in something there, Leslie, just about the orb, because that is kind of important in this. They tend to be quite tight orbs, in case any of the astrologers out there are wondering, how do we decide whether it's in a conjunction or not?
Yeah. So as far as the orbs of the stars, there are charts in the books, and they're delineated by decades, because the stars do move slowly, but and then they were, by Anonico, were advised by the Celestial Council of what kind of orb to give a given star. A lot of them are 2.5. Some of them will go up to 5. Either way.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. And then here's the thing about this. We get into the fact that here we are at 0 degree Capricorn. We have a cosmic human star. What does that mean? It means this soul family is learning on this star, Nushaba al-Nasi, and they're learning a very specific thing. We're going to hear what it is, because that's kind of what the frequency coming in is just to tell us at this point. Now, this star is at 1 degree 36 of Capricorn, but it's actually, so it's within orb of the 0 degree, but it's actually in the Sagittarius constellation, which is a little bit of a mind, but it's moved beyond it. So I may go back and forth here. Let's look at the first 2 stars I want to go to. Well, let's illuminate. We've got the cosmic humans coming through with Nushaba. We've got the bears coming through. I'll explain what this is, on Spiculum, and these are both in the Sagittarius. And then we've got the dragon nation coming through on the star Etamin. Okay, do you have a question before I move on?
No, not really. It's just going to clarify that this is how we're going to start reading this chart, is by using, and it may be a little confusing at first to see these lists, many stars that maybe don't resonate, or they're not in people's awareness, but that's okay. Just bear with us, because what we want to do is tease out the themes of the stars that are in action on this particular solstice. And so we're going to look at the sun first, and then we're going to have a look at that conjunction with Mercury and see, oh, well, it's the same stars actually, right? It's the same, same stars.
Except for Etamin is only on the sun.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that, basically, that's what we're going to do. So Leslie's now going to, without, I mean, there's so much material here. We could be for hours explaining it, but we want to tease out the themes that our cosmic codes are likely to be experiencing and getting activated.
Yeah, and if we jump around to other things, we won't go through laboriously through this, but I just want to show you the basic way it works with these 2 stars. And every particular soul family, as you said, is like an archetype and has a mission, if you will, and a story. Now, the cosmic humans are cosmic humans. The cosmic humans were literally humans that were given the mission to hold all 13 stellar nations inside and let them be the forms and frames of their experiencing. Now, their lapse was to push it all out. That's bigger part of the story. But at any rate, that's the mission of the cosmic humans. The bear nation is called the Christ community because the bears are teachers. So it's a teacher archetype, but they're teachers of the heart qualities. They're teacher really of how to hold, maintain, recognize the heart qualities that are in the 5th, 6th, 7th dimensional frequencies. So we could say that they're the teachers, messengers of what we would call Christ consciousness. And then the dragons are a warrior nature. Now, these are all part of ourselves, okay? So our dragon part is a warrior, but in the very finest sense of being a warrior. The highest sense of a warrior is you stand up for a principle because that principle matters. And the dragons are a nation that's stands up for divine will. And they're very well trained, yang type of energy, that martial arts, Far Eastern type of energy that has to master, discipline the body, you know, very, very, what's
Like
the
an
word?
elemental mastery, right? That's how I often think. The dragons, on the one hand, have that warrior kind of defending divine will, but they're also very much made up of the elementals.
Yes. Yes. And that's why the reason I'm even bringing all that up right now is because they're first, they have to train and be initiated and know the 8 virtues of a dragon. And the first 5 of them are the elementals: earth, air, water, fire, and then ether. And then we go on with some others. So this happens to be one of them. So we'll go through that now. So you're going to notice we've got Nushaba and Spiculum on the sun, but only Etamin, the dragon star, on the sun. But then we repeat Nushaba and Spiculum on Mercury. So a couple things here. On the stellar nation, in the stellar nations, because of the whole cosmology and the backstory, Mercury is always considered, whatever comes through Mercury is considered, it's like whispering in the ear of the sun. It's an amplified message. Whatever is on Mercury is something to really listen to. Now, here it's fairly conjunct, so that makes another, you know, impelling reason to listen to it as well. It's like these stars are coming through 2 lenses. So let's just look at what these stars are. What are they trying to tell us?
Sorry, there must be a Mercury Cazimi somewhere, either just before or I'm thinking just after solstice, because that's a really tight conjunction there. And so that makes that a super powerful illumination, a solar illumination of the message, right? Of the communicational abilities of Mercury. So I think it must be a day or so afterwards, but just to think about that too, that's the sort of potency of a Cazimi.
Okay, yeah, that I can't speak to, but yes, that may well be, because it's all energetic, right? So I just want to show you here where the 2 stars are. Nushaba and Spiculum. Nushaba is right at the point of where the archer is going to shoot the arrow, and Spiculum is actually the Lagoon Nebula above. It's in the Lagoon Nebula above. So what are these trying to, you know, what's happening on these worlds that is now coming down to give us their frequency, their picture? Well, we've got Nushaba, as I said, at 136 of Capricorn. And I just put this picture in here because it's kind of the, it's a visual of the thrust and the fierceness of this point of the arrow about to shoot out, right? But what does that mean? What is all this about? So Nushaba is, in the galactic sense, it's the point where the arrow of truth is shot from. And we're talking about truth with a capital T. And when you're connected with a star, if you have a piece of your soul on it, or now it's coming down, it's asking us to feel its energy. This is where we as humans can really represent the truth, capital T, and divine order to serve justice, both in cosmic and in earthly karmic dramas. Okay, so there's going to be, we'll get into with other slides, well, where can we take this from here? Let's just go over the meanings. The other thing about this thrust, right? The arrow is about to launch. There's an amazing energy of creativity here. It's like, this is the time to dare to dream bravely. There's a real strong faith and certainty that there's a realizing power here. Okay, and then, but it also asks us, you're shooting the arrow, so where is it going? Define your purpose. Because what happens is when you define your purpose, it's like you create a magnetic attraction towards the purpose. So it keeps pulling you forward. And in that sense, Nushaba has the energy of like the MC or the North Node, but more in a cosmic galactic sense, because it's in our own personal Antares code, its placement helps define our karmic mission and goals. Like we can really look into what our karmic background soul mission is based on where it is. But we should also realize, I mean, it's about reaching the goal on one level, but it's also about the fact that the process of moving towards the goal works towards our development. So this is the kind of frame that we could adopt consciously for moving into the light with the solstice. And this is coming through the sun and coming through Mercury. So it's amplified. Any thought or question, or should I just go on?
Yeah, no, actually, I just wanted to cover, put a couple of pieces into the mix, and so I mean that makes total sense, right? Because we're going into the 3 days of darkness. The solstice, the Capricorn solstice, at least in the northern hemisphere, denotes 3 days where the sun technically doesn't rise above the horizon line, so they call it a 3 days of darkness. I would put that akin to the void. It's like going into the womb space and the void, which is the place of ultimate manifestation and creativity. But in order to manifest that, we need some solar energy. We need a spark, and that's what happens with the return of the light. But if we're to shoot our arrow, and I always relate this to yarrow, the arrow of yarrow, which is about being very, very clear and efficient in our intentions and sending them like an arrow to spirit, not as some long 20-minute diatribe conversation that spirit's not really sure what were you asking by the end of it, but something really, really concise that we send clearly, and we put that into the void space. That is the 3 days between the solstice and the return of the light, or the return of the sun. And then we have that very powerful full moon a couple of days later. So it's like we're being offered this amazing opportunity to dare to dream bravely with our creativity, and thus realize the power that we hold within ourselves. So I think it's perfect, Leslie, and yeah, definitely makes me think a lot about working with yarrow at this time, so that I can get clear in the expression of what those dreams look like.
Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so going on to Spiculum. So remember, this is a bear star, which is the qualities of Christ consciousness, the heart. This is a fun star. This speaks about the learning skills of a human as a stellar being. So it's already bringing in the stellar impulses, and it's sort of saying, you know, this is what you are, you know these, because the spiculum is just, it's the flash of brilliance that just comes out, where you just know. It's like, it's all the intuition coming together. What it really is your stellar understanding coming in. It's beyond lexical knowledge. And it's, you know, you couldn't go to school to study anything. You couldn't go get a master's in something that would be better than, you know, what spiculum can bring through, because it's that innate knowing of these higher realms, really, of the stellar impulses. So this is telling us that we have learning skills as a human that can help us understand that we are also stellar beings. And that this is telling us we should trust those flashes, and that they are actually really something, you know, part of a much bigger cosmology.
So in essence, we're learning to remember how to be the cosmic humans that we originally were always in the first place, something like that.
That would certainly lend it. Yeah, yeah. And we'll look at a little summary, but yes. Now we're having Etamin, which this falls a little bit before the Capricorn zero. It's at 2804 of Sagittarius. This is the dragon star. Remember, this is the warrior for divine will. And this is asking us, this piece of us is asked to master the balance of water. But that's the balance of emotion, which makes a lot of sense here, because we can't do the other two. We can't, you know, let Nushaba actualize or spiculum if our emotions are not balanced. So we really need to come into that space of understanding, like a good warrior would, why you would detach yourself from your emotions. You won't get caught in the dramas going back and forth. And it's not only about knowing your own emotions, but it's also the ability to discern the emotions of others and in your interactions and decide how to artfully, be with that so they don't trigger you, or so how you understand them. So it's really as simple as that, but that's what the message is coming through here.
Right. So, I mean, it's quite simple, really. We've got a threefold thematic approach there, which really, to bring it down to its essence, which is in order to be able to plant or fire our arrows into the void space clearly and coherently, we need to be remembering the skills that we have as a cosmic human being. But in order to be able to do that coherently, we need to be in a balanced emotional space. Because if we're misaligned or super emotional or getting triggered, the chances are that we're not going to be thinking too clearly. And that muddled, foggy, distorted thinking is going to come into our intention setting. And so perhaps then we're going to end up being misaligned. So it feels to me like we're being very much encouraged to get on top of our emotions, which of course it should be something that we're doing all the time, but there's an extra kind of impetus at this solstice, because in order for us to become fifth dimensional beings, we have to have our emotions under control. Otherwise, we're still getting bounced around by our 4D astral emotional bodies, right?
Just stay in the whack-a-back back and forth. And then we're not going to realize the promise of, like, well, what the spiculum is telling us is really also calling us into our heart, because that's something that you have to feel, trust, believe, and then go with it, right? It's not concrete knowledge.
Not coming from here, right, Leslie? It's not coming from the head.
It's what comes up from within. Yeah. It's a knowing, but it often comes out as, a flash of brilliance in a situation. You got to trust it. You can be that. But it is coming from your stellar self. Okay. So I got a couple more summary things, and then we can open the discussion. I just wanted to show you those two specifically. We can go to some others just thematically. But so if we were going to summarize, and we've kind of done it already, stellar message on the solstice coming through our sun / higher self. Each of us holds power as individuals, but our power is in our choices. That's where the emotions come in, and choosing to believe spiculum. Do we set our purpose? Do we do this consciously? So we can aim for the truth, choose our truth, dream bravely, use our dreams and our purpose as a navigational tool. That's also important, because we're going to go through the days and, you get caught in the fray, although you're not. You're going to try to hold yourself, but you're going to need to have that beacon, like that navigational tool. No, this is my purpose. This is the truth. I'm holding to this. So you're developing yourself from the aim for a purpose, and you're mastering the emotional body. But this gives us a task, and this is often how we can work with our Antares Code and our stellar nations. We have to realize this is our self that we're developing a relationship with, a piece of us that's intimately with us, but hasn't had such a, can send us messages, but now we're learning, like, the pictures and the codes. We're learning the framework of our stellar self, so we can open a conversation with it. And the methodology with the stellar nations is really simply to ask. Like, something comes up, an intuitive, or you see on your code, like, what does that mean? You literally ask. Who are you asking? You're asking yourself. That's the other good thing. By asking yourself, you're tapping into your own galactic Akashic records. So you're the only one who can get an undistorted answer from that. So what's our task here? Like, just on this solstice point, because it's not as personal per se, but we're trying to make these frequencies be strengthening personally. We can ask, how can I access the larger galactic process? And we can turn it into an inner quest. These questions can become our quest. As we go through our 3D day, what is my highest truth in any situation? Like, let's say you've identified your highest truth, but you come into a situation and you're like, you have to apply it in some way. What do? Are you quiet with it? Being quiet with it is actually basically okay if you hold the coherency, because you don't have to be an activist necessarily. You don't have to, that can get you into more 3D drama. You have to decide, though, what's the best way to hold that truth in any situation. You're also asking, now that we know what the rays are, what are my highest dreams? Am I reaching them? Do I have limitations? What are they? What is my North Node? And can I define it, keep it in sight, and navigate by it? So there's just this whole feeling of opening up the dialogue with yourself is very empowering and important, because it's really the methodology that really brings us into coherency and sovereignty and our own personal power as well. And then I also want to say, from my own experience, stellar consciousness happens through the body. It's like, it's just amazing. Like, we talk about our body as this incredible transducer, this incredible gift. We get the stellar consciousness through the stellar rays, but we have to realize Gaia gets the stellar consciousness at her crystal core. She sends it back out through the earth. We're transducers for both of it. But when we hear and we can discern and we can define the whisperings of the stellar rays that come through, we literally are offering our body a way to interact with life. We're offering our body a way to make choices. And going back to what we said before about the Metatron's cube and having all those possibilities, that raises the octave of our form state, literally. I mean, if you want to talk about walking around with a more fifth dimensional apprehension, that's where you're connected to the divine matrix, which is endlessly creative and renewing, and that's what we call synchronicities and stuff. But a lot of us have spoken as we go into this state for periods of time, and it's just like magic happens. So, but I would like to introduce the thought that we can actually invite this in by knowing stellar consciousness. We can be more purposeful about it and this is one way to do it. This is a very coherent system. There may be others. All right, so that's all I have as far as this. So we can open the conversation. You could ask me to just thematically jump in on other things if you want.
Yeah, so for the final 10 minutes or so, I just want to bring up a couple of points, and maybe we'll just pull up the chart and have a look at a couple of other things. And so the first thing I just want to tackle is the mundane versus the personal. So we're taking a chart reading for the collective according to the astrology. But if you have, in this case, anything within a couple of degrees of the sun, at 0 degrees of Capricorn, the likelihood is that these planets are going to be in or these stars are going to be in your code. So my question is, Leslie, if that's the case for individuals, does that mean that it's going to amplify for them at the personal level? So we're looking at the personal motif if your stars are getting activated, but there's also a collective energy in the same way that we would with a normal astrological reading.
Yeah, I think it would, because you're basically, you literally chose to have your stellar blueprint come into this incarnation. It's part of your reminding and remembering field. And you literally have a part of your soul actively on that star. I mean, of course, all the stars influence us, all that light does. But what we're saying with our Antares code or our blueprint is we've isolated for this incarnation a stellar mantle, if you will, of things that are just much more up for us based on where we are with the trajectory of our consciousness, of our galactic consciousness. And so we chose to create a stellar mantle like this, and that's where we get into a little bit of like more of the astrology, like, oh, wow, we threw a lot in the first quadrant, so we're working on self-identity. But when we can look at the stars, what do the stars say about that? They can stay a little bit more, they can add information. They're like, the first quadrant in those houses and the planetary rays are on the stage of our lives. And it's literally a stage, say we're watching the play. The stars are like the backlighting. So, you're watching a play and then a light comes onto this scene, right? So the stars are bringing that level in. But yes, I think to answer your question, I think that if you find that you have these particular stars coming through really anywhere on your code, you probably have a more personal connection with them. And you may see, based on your, gosh, what if you actually have Nushaba on your MC? It's like a big part of your purpose to realize the truth, to,
So I just wanted to bring that in because I mean, I'm just going to talk from my own perspective here on this particular solstice. That degree that the sun is at is not actually triggering anything personally for me in my Antares code. The moon, on the other hand, yes, it's conjunct my south node, so maybe we'll have a look at that in a minute. But all of the themes that we have just talked about, I can understand that these are very, very important, if not imperative, for the collective to engage with, because we are coming to the end of a cycle and there is a new blank canvas awaiting all of us, and it's up to us to paint the picture. Because if we do what has happened before, we're going to let somebody else paint the picture for us, and then again we're living in somebody else's picture rather than living in our own kind of landscape portrait, we can say, right? So if we have anything being triggered on the sun, the chances are that this is going to be even more nuanced, more important, and depending according, like you just said, whether it's conjunct an MC or an IC or a DC or something like this, then it's going to have
Chiron. You might be like, oh, I got to look at that.
Right, yeah. So if you have Chiron at 0 degrees of Capricorn on this solstice, well, then yes, it's obviously going to be super important to you. And looking at it through this additional layer or filter that the cosmic codes of the constellations gives us another layer at a soul level to understand why this is important to us in this moment, and why we should take action. Because we, of course, can be either dynamic or passive with our astrology. It doesn't matter. It's all going on anyway, as we talked about earlier off camera. You know, working with Mayan time, the 13-day wave spells are happening anyway. The glyphs of every day and the energy of those glyphs is happening anyway. However, we can be a more conscious participant with the awareness of what is going on or not. So we can either get hit by the energies and let them bounce us around, or we can see them somewhat coming towards us and understanding them and work with them to create magic and manifestation. So,
well, I also want to suggest and say it's our responsibility to do this, in the sense that if we want to call in a fifth dimensional world, we have to start being it, and we have to start identifying it.
Of course, right?
You know, so, and also, according to the stellar nations, when Gaia does go through the dimensional shift, it's like, and we've brought this out in some of our, we've done it in our courses, but you're going through the portal, and these soul aspects of ourselves are literally going to be reaching down for us, and we're really reaching up. We're calling for them. We have to be them to make them happen. But if we get to that point and they're there and we don't see them, I mean, it's kind of like the indigenous people who didn't see the ship on the shore because they couldn't identify with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the thought with the stellar nations is that the next potential cosmic ascension portal is in 2030. And we're talking about if enough of humanity is, I mean, Gaia is going through her steps, and she'll literally become like a Merkaba. And we're on Gaia, and then there's a whole process. And their whole philosophy is, from their inner seeing, and they've written stuff on this, it's available. There's another Earth-like planet actually shielded out there. When Gaia moves her out of this dimensional portal, we'll be on her. It will be the 3 days of darkness, and it will be prepared or not. There will be a false white light, actually, to grab people who think that's the right way to go. But the point is, once Gaia settles into her field, which will be a fifth dimensional field, well, first of all, even to get there, that's where we need to kind of know that when we see this help offered to us, that we're reaching for it. But when we get there, in a fifth dimensional world, our thoughts are instantaneous. So if we've done all this preparatory work and we're on this vein, we're comfortable with the fluidity, which we can learn from doing the stellar nations, we're going to stay there. That's our new home. But if we can't, if our thoughts haven't been cleaned up, we're going to see the most horrific things. And then by resonance, just float back. I mean, this is all I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but float back to this other planet that is much like Earth, that's going to take Earth's orbit.
It's very much like the Ragnarok process as it's laid out at the end of the era that they talk about in the Norse traditions. And there's the 3 days of darkness where the sort of process that you've just laid out kind of unfolds. And then when the light comes back on, it's like, it's described as still being Earth somehow, but somehow it's different. And it has a different frequency in the field to it. And I think the Ragnarok in the Norse traditions is very much the process that we're all headed towards. And I think the onus, as you said, is on each and every one of us to take responsibility for us to be activating that 5D plus energies within ourselves. Because if each one of us takes responsibility at the individual level, then we don't have to worry what is going to happen to the collective. In fact, it isn't really our responsibility to worry about the collective. It's our responsibility to worry about ourselves and to take action. And this is where I think that we've had a lot of Mars action recently in the astrology, and Mars is giving us that energy to take action. But with Saturn being in Pisces, and maybe we're going to have a little look at this for the last few minutes, it felt very much to me like the energy of the Mars in Scorpio, the Mars Cazimi, sort of hit a wall of water that didn't stop it moving forwards, but it kind of subdued it or muted it slightly, so that each step was less kind of Mars and frantic and frenetic and more sort of measured and paced, as you would expect with Saturn in Pisces. So Saturn is actually squaring both the moon and the sun on this solstice. So do you, and I know there's a couple of stars attached with that, Leslie, so do you just want to pull up the chart there again, and we can, for the last few minutes, just talk about a couple of other things that maybe our audience will find interesting on this solstice reading.
Okay, so here we've got Saturn in Pisces, as you said, on the solstice at 225. I have to tell you that Saturn here through the stellar worlds are the softest, most beautiful, incredible energies coming through. Okay, wow. So we've got the 7th dimensional star Fomalhaut, which the unicorn nation, which is our whole creative dreaming side, is coming through. It's also on the whale nation coming through it. The whale nation is the part of us who basically has accepted mercy, gotten out of the karmic prison, is metamorphosizing back into its original self. It's on its return, and it's so full of compassion for having understood what the journey's been. But Fomalhaut is the most beautiful 7th dimensional world of creativity and dreams. There's a golden cosmic lake on it that's like a membrane that you can lay on. You can see into the galaxy through it. You can see the dreams that are happening. You can express your dreams. You can ask questions. It's a big realizing star in that sense. And it's, I mean, they say in the book, anywhere you have Fomalhaut, you can consider yourself blessed if you've brought it in on your incarnation. So it's interesting that it's on Saturn, which, being square, which is often a confrontation, it's bringing a softer energy. So that's something you talk about or not. But the Sadalmelik, however we say it, this is really just thematically, this star basically is the Arab word for it, I think, means lucky star of the world. It's really about, you're coming to the end of your journey and you're gathering all your recollections to offer back to the creator, but it's an ending point, and it's a celebratory kind of point. It's you're near the finish of something. The Pegasus are messengers. They're very close to the divine. This part of us close to the divine mind gets messages, is asked to bring them, like literally to be like a light in the darkness with these messages, plant these messages as seeds. And the Pegasus star here is at the nose of the Pegasus. So it's where the breath comes in and out. So it's the sort of easy ability to be plasticine, to know, like, just like the breath coming in and out, to know where you have to go to deliver your messages. Like, oh, you can just blend in. You may know multiple languages. I mean, I could, not it could be literally. If you have Enifm on your code, you may be very multilingual. But I'm also meaning languages and forms of how you can express, how you can be with situations, how you can mold in, how you can read energy. And then the whales here on Enif, remember, this is the part of ourselves that's coming back, metamorphosizing. It's in the whole process of redemption and return. The whale part of ourselves here is it's picking up its mission codes from the divine mind, and it's literally, it's again like the breath. It's every breath, it's every heartbeat becomes the whale's desire to hold the message of the divine mind. And what the whales specifically do is they take those messages and they go to celestial worlds, either etherically or for real, like in our oceans, or there's other planets. They are coding the morphogenetic field. Like the morphogenetic field around any celestial body is constantly being frayed, especially because the morphogenetic field is an expression of the divine mind. But when we don't act in concert with the divine mind, it starts to fray. Or we have, EMS, we have HARP, we have lower emotional energies. It starts to fray that, but the whales are constantly coming in. Enif is like kind of breathing it in. It's soundings, everything vibrationally about the whale is bringing that. And then the bird star, Deneb Adige, oh my gosh, that's on the tail of the Cygnus constellation, the swan. And it's the birds are all about, the birds are such a gift to the cosmic humans. The bird nation are messengers to us, and they're reflections of our own consciousness. And the Cygnus constellation, they also, a gift to humans was all the fairies and elves as Davyd levels, elemental levels, as co-creators of the planets that we were given. In the Milky Way galaxy, we were given 33 planets. We happen to be on Earth. We actually have the biggest assignment on Earth. We're the planet of redemption, and we're meant to re-embody all the 13 stellar nations as the 13 light seals that the Creator made for this creation cycle in this Milky Way galaxy. And we're meant to bring them into harmony. And we're meant to bring into balance and harmony the masculine and feminine. Earth is called the planet of redemption for all the karmic galactic codes for the different cosmic wars we've been in and such. But the birds are a gift to us. And the Deneb Adige on the tail of the swan is the home to fairies and elves, and it's absolutely magical. There's fire elves that take care of the stars. There's there's elves that, like, there's 9 master trees up there that are inhabited by elves, and those trees, they spark things on other stars. But trees, we have to understand, trees are cosmic memory holders. Their ethereal bodies go from the earth up to Deneb and to other stars. And trees do the service of pulling in our emotions and holding our emotions. Otherwise, we'd be crazed, and probably the morphogenic field couldn't hold. And let's see, Deneb has something else. Oh, it's got the fairies creating. They're creating, like, when they create gardens, they know how to they work in a frequency, like some, how some plants go together because they're harmonic and others don't. Well, the fairies are just all behind that. They know every aspect of it. So this Saturn is just like absolutely magical.
So let's just see if I can bring all of that into a place of conclusion. I've been making notes as you've been talking. So we have Saturn in Pisces. We understand Saturn is about structure. Pisces is very much about mutable water, collective emotional energy, and so on. And so now we've got these other beautiful stars that are also being conjuncted by Saturn, which is a fairly slow-moving planet. So these energies will be going on for some time. And at the collective or the personal level, depending if this is getting activated in your chart, we have a series of beautiful dreaming energies. That's what I'm getting here. Leslie, is how to dream through our emotions, perhaps so that we can give ourselves that Saturnian structure that we need, and so that we don't get bounced around by the solar rays coming in at 0 degrees of Capricorn, which is telling us that we need to balance our emotions, because if we don't, then everything at a watery level is going to get thrown out, so we can't be at our creative best. And it seems that with this energy, that the impulse is to work with the nature spirits, to work with the fairies, to work with the elves, who are the beings at a cosmic level who help construct the very filament of the environment around us. Now, there are other beings involved in that too, such as Great Mother Spider from the Arthropod Nation and other beings too. But it seems that we are being very much encouraged to receive what are the mission codes coming from the higher mind or from Great Spirit, and to work them through our system in co-creation and harmony with our creativity, but also with the nature spirits, the fairies and the elves. And so what that speaks to me of is how to connect ourselves deeply to the earth and to the creative forces at work here on planet Earth, but to do it through the emotional realm, but not in a willy-nilly, very Piscean way where the waters are going everywhere, but in a way where it's being held. And actually, as we were talking about off camera, I did a sacred fungi ceremony last night. And one of the things that came to me very clearly was that as humans, we are a little bit exposed or vulnerable in the watery nature of our bodies if we haven't got the waters in our body clean and clear. Because if we're carrying polluted water in our body, that means that we're carrying pollution in our energetic field. And what I came to realize was, very long story short, is that unless we have complete clarity and no back doors in a watery, emotional way into our fields, we still run the risk of being actually manipulated through the waters in our body, which we've talked a lot about on quantum plant healing, and we've looked at various things to do with metals and toxicity and so on and so forth in our waters, and the need to put clean, good water into us rather than to keep recycling dirty water through our system. So I think that in order to get to that place of clear dreaming and creativity, we are being guided to look at the structured nature of water in our bodies so that we can manifest cleanly through that filter space.
Yes. Okay. I'm sure that's true. That has to be true. It is true. Right. But Saturn itself now, yes, is actually it's still going to be Saturn, but it's softening. Right. But we have other places that aren't soft, so this is a big balancing act.
Right.
I could quickly point out too, I was struck by Uranus here being, I guess I can't get the pointer back, but because it's not in a slide. But anyway, if you can see maybe my arrow is showing. If Uranus here, which is at Taurus, 1939, it's got a Pegasus or a messenger soul. Now, Uranus is going to bring energy of let's get out of the box, right?
Right.
That message is endings. It is time for an ending. So you must know that endings are coming. Now, that's upsetting on a third dimensional level a lot of times to be a messenger of endings, especially if you carry that code. But it's really strong in you, actually, if you have that code. Of course, depending where it is to some degree. But on a galactic level, endings are the most natural thing. They are the root, the juice of life, because it's about turnover. It's about renewal. It's about the flow of creation. But Uranus is telling us, starting on the solstice, that there's a message coming in of endings. And we look at Jupiter, which wants to amplify things, right? And we've got some tricky things going on in Jupiter. We've got I'm just going to go thematically. I won't get into all the nations and all that, but thematically, we've got a really virtuous dragon star that held right to the mission and the highest. And we've got one that was totally corrupt and went with the dark forces. And that at one point literally did a nuclear attack and wiped out the virtuous one. Okay. We've got a dolphin star there, which wants to bring in healing. This particular dolphin star, dolphins sing the frequencies of love and make light cocoons around things. They stabilize people who have died. They stabilize traumatic things. In the history of Koph, there was a point at which they were around souls that were so deeply traumatized they couldn't stabilize them. And actually, that's the kind of energy that came off Sheraton exploding, which is right in a degree frequency. So analogously, it's there. So these are all energies in us. Like if we have Hamel, that's a very big betrayal, and it's by a family member. So we may see that come out in, if it's in our code, it may really explain something to us. That's the beauty of this. If we can start to see the patterns at the root, they can hurt a little. It can hurt to feel it at first, but it carries off. You lighten up. Your karmic knots get pulled apart, and it's a big relief. So, but Kaf was basically saved, so to speak, in helping these souls. The Bear Nation felt its distress, and the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, which are the 7 seeds of Christ consciousness, radiated out to Kaf as the dolphin and infused the 7 seeds of Christ consciousness around the blowhole of Kaf. That was enough amplified energy that the traumatized souls were pacified and taken care of, but that energy stayed with Kaf. So I could go on, and I don't want to get too much because we're going to stop. But I want you to know that what'll happen is if you embody the stellar nations, like these stories, that becomes a language. It's shorthand that you just get. You get in a situation, you think of a stellar ray, it just comes in, and then you remember the dynamic of it, you ask for its strength, or it's like what I feel like when you embody the stellar nations, it's like you're literally putting in blood it's into your etheric body, and it's circulating, it's taking a form. Okay, I'm going to stop there because obviously it's not going to mean much to people, but I want to tell you just that little thing.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and I'm realizing that the Jupiter and the Moon are basically conjunct 5 degrees on the solstice, and that whole point in the first 5 degrees of Taurus is actually a super potent point for a whole host of stars. And I know that from experience because it's all conjunct my south node. So what I can say from personal experience is that when I was reflecting on all of these different nations and how they've affected my south node, which is my past, I started to understand how some of the things in my life have played out according to the soul wounding that was being described through stars conjuncting my south node. So I could see that that's technically, even though I said at the beginning or earlier that it's all happening simultaneously, on somehow a linear time space, my soul has already experienced that and brought it in as the blueprint that it wanted to resolve. So if you have anything in the first 5 degrees of Taurus, chances are that you're going to have a lot of stuff getting activated because there's lots of very powerful stars there.
Well, look what's interesting, because they don't carry the same stars. They're far enough away to carry different stars, but the moon is really reflective of our inner emotional nature. So we were warned on the sun that we have to balance our emotions, right? But where might the challenges come in? Well, Jupiter, and the Jupiter's near the moon, our inner emotional nature. And then we have certain stars here actually strengthening, but also challenging us a little bit emotionally too. The Andromeda galaxy is all about the great feline nation was pushed out to it. It is like the yearning for the goddess, and it is the feminine coming back. But it's all these complex themes and emotions that we're in the middle of living. But they're exemplified in these stories, so we can look at them, but we can also feel them. They come through us.
Right. I mean, just look, yes, you're right. The 5 degrees difference actually is quite substantial in stellar nations, although astrologically speaking, it's a conjunction of a 5 degree orb. But what I can say is, because this is really, really powerful for me on my south node, is that Alwesha, Andromeda Galaxy, and Mirak are all very much the scenes of cosmic rebellions or separations from creative mind, great source, great spirit, but with the impulse of sovereignty, which is something that I personally carry very strongly in my sense of being. And so when I was learning about all of this, as we worked through, particularly the Great Feline and the Pegasus nations, I was able to feel that at a deep-rooted soul level, things that I'd always experienced, but had never really had any explanation as to why. So for me, I'm just giving a personal example here, it tells me that that process that I've been through of rebelling at a soul level against Great Spirit for sovereignty is now coming to its conclusion, because those, we can say, falls or rebellions in the past were coming from how to say, an ideal or an idealistic place that was ahead of its time. The premise wasn't incorrect, but the timing was wrong. I now feel that what this is showing me with the moon in Jupiter is that the timing is correct to step into that place of sovereignty, because we've done her story, we've done his story, and now we're doing our story. And in order to be able to do our story, we have to balance the masculine, the feminine, the solar, the lunar again, the return of the light, the full moon. We've got all of this harmonizing, balancing energy of those polarities that we experience down here on planet Earth in duality, coming to a place of balance, so that that sun energy that's asking us to balance out those emotional energies can be utilized to plant the powerful seeds in the void space, and then activate with the return of the light. So I think that what we're really getting here with this chart, Leslie, is beautiful, actually. I think it is a really positive solstice energy that we've got coming up in a few weeks' time. But I think that, like everything, we're being asked to be dynamic and not passive. We're asked to being consciously aware of what is going on for us. What is my mission code, my soul's code to be here at this time?
All dynamic, always. We have to get used to that. But you know what? It's fun when it's dynamic on the upper dimensions. Because it's fresh. You're connecting with your original organic matrix.
Right, we're pulling the information down from the blueprint behind the blueprint, and that's what I think Leslie is saying right now, is that we're connecting with those higher impulses that speak to us of our multidimensional soul self, but bringing them down here into the super 3D, where the energy is the most dense, is the most difficult job of all, and that's what we signed up to come and experience. And that is why we are here, being humans, remembering that we were once cosmic humans, by encompassing all of these codes within us and being coherent with them and aware of them.
But what happens, though, is you start to seat your consciousness in the galactic. Right. You really do. You can be in the
you're this and not this, right?
No, I mean, you're in the everyday 3D world. In fact, that's how we're helping with this whole moving towards the new Earth, because we've got to drop in our Pegasus messages. You know, we have to be, though, the pieces of us that are closer to the divine mind in those dimensions, and bring the frequency here. But we have to do it in what's happening here. And the stories are endless, and every kind of situation we get in, and you've alluded to some of them, like, oh, you rebelled because you wanted sovereignty and it was really a good impulse. Now, there are some parts of us that rebelled for really not good impulses, you know, really power hungry, and that, so all that's in the mix. And in fact, on the moon, anxiously, the dragon star here, Mira, is the place of temptations. Like it's asking the question, like, so what would you do for, like, if you're tempted, what are you going to decide on? Are you going to decide on your personality level that you want this reward for yourself? Or are you going to look at it with the perspective of the whole? Like, where are you with this? So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the Dragon Nation is challenging, because a lot of it's about ego and temptation. And for sure, you know, you, like I do, I have all of those: Mira, Mirak, Andromeda Galaxy, and Al-Resha all at the same time. So on one level, yes, my soul was engaged in rebellious actions for an idealistic purpose, but at some other point, my soul was also engaged in power hungry activities that were really just for its own ends. And so, you know, I think the trick with all of this is to understand that our souls have been on these incredible cosmic journeys, and sometimes we did things from a really great place and sometimes not so much. And it's a bit like this incarnation. I'm sure if we're honest with ourselves, we can look back over our lives and say, hey, I did some really great things, but I also sucked a little bit here and there when I wasn't being so conscious, or I was still playing out my code. So perhaps, Leslie, for the last minute or two, we'll just take down the slide and just wrap up. We've gone over a little bit today, but that's not unusual for me and Leslie. Once we get into this material,
sorry guys, if you're still here.
But it was important, I think, Leslie, just to give some overviews at the beginning as to how this kind of works, because we're not sure how often we're going to do these shows, but we're going to do them whenever we feel like there's something important to share according to what's going on in the astrology. So this solstice is a very important time. It's also important for us on the Stellar Nations pathway, because we are with the final wave spell of the year from the 12th to the 24th of December, entering into the final and 15th module of the Stellar Nations pathway that we have laid out here on QPW quantumplanet.world. And you can jump into that at any point and start exploring in more detail how this relates to you specifically, and how all of these cosmic stories so beautifully fit together and are coherent. And I also just want to allude at that time that Leslie is going to be joining us on the special journey we have coming up, which starts on the 12th of December with the new moon. It's also the beginning of the Red Skywalker Mayan wave spell glyph, which is very much about connection to the goddess. It's the number 13. The glyph carries a number 13, which is the goddess, which is also my glyph. So I'm feeling this is a very powerful time for me, but also it's about how do we connect with all of the different things that we've just been talking about. And of course, we've got this powerful Yule time or solstice on the 21st, the return of the light on the 24th, and then we have the full moon on the 26th. So I'm going to put in the show notes connections and links to all of these things. We are running currently some special early bird offers on the journey starting on the 12th. It's called The Return of the Light, a journey to solstice, Yule, and beyond, because we're going to be working with all of these energies that we've just been talking about here. And the beyond piece is about the seeds that we're planting and the visionary dreams that we're calling in from our higher mind galactic selves down here into 3D, so that we can collectively move towards that culmination point where Earth is going to ascend. And those of us that are on that pathway hopefully we'll be there. In the meantime, we have a space to hold down here in the soup. And I want to thank Leslie. Do you have anything to add as a final thought, Leslie, about anything?
I don't think so. We could, like you said, we could add 20 hours of final thoughts.
Yeah, every time we go to say goodbye on our
Never
videos,
final.
20 minutes. So thank you, Leslie. Thank you for being the wonderful guide and teacher that you've been over the last 6 months through the Stellar Nations pathway. It's profoundly changed my life. It's made sense of all of the things in the first half of my life until now that didn't make sense. And I invite all of you out there watching this Cosmic History Codes edition to check out the material on the Stellar Nations page on quantumplanet.world. So we look forward to seeing hopefully many of you either in Stellar Nations pathway, over at QPH, maybe with the Return to the Light, or if not, just enjoy this show and take the information with you forwards and work with it in the most appropriate of ways. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Leslie, again. And thank you to all of my cosmic ancestors as personified through the Stellar Nations cosmic codes. Ciao for now. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.